Subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah, I'm calling your name. Oh Allah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk on your favorite channel, Huda TV. I'm your host, Arqam Rashid. On tonight's episode, we will be discussing tolerance within Islamic law. Now, even though this is a continuation of last week's episode, the topic will slightly vary, as last week we were speaking about tolerance when it comes to other religions. So let's start off by welcoming and getting to know our panel for tonight. On my right-hand side, brother, if you can give us your name, where you're from, and a little bit about yourself. Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. My name is Ibrahim ibn Khalil Hurani. I'm from Germany. I'm studying here in Egypt in Al-Azhar University in Faculty of Islamic Law, third year.
All right, welcome to the show, Ibrahim. You've been on the show with us before, and it was lovely having you, and it's going to be lovely having you tonight again.
Jazakumullah khair.
Brother next to him, if you can give us your name and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Muhammad Tawfiq. I'm from the UK. I've recently finished my university education, and now I'm in Egypt trying to study Arabic and Islamic studies.
All right, welcome Mamadou. I believe this is your first time on the show with us here, so I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you.
If I can come over to the other side, brother, if you can give us your name, where you're from, and a little bit about yourself. Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. My name is Ilyas Townsend. I'm here in Egypt with my family, and I've been here a few times, so hopefully people know me right now.
I'm pretty sure everyone knows you right now. You're one of my favorite guests. It's always interesting speaking with you here.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to be here with the brothers.
Brother next to Ilyas, if you can give us your name, where you're from, and a little bit about yourself.
Ali Umar Al-Ghazali, 21 years old, Egyptian Azhari student, studying translation of Islamic studies.
All right, Ali, welcome to the show. You've been with us for a couple episodes before,
Yes,
I believe.
a few times, yeah.
And it was wonderful having you, and we're looking forward to this conversation. So inshallah, let's start off the conversation by something very important, which is the basis of our topic today, which is the differences of opinion in Islam. Now this phrase is thrown around so commonly, yes. But we want to understand what the phrase actually means. What does it mean when somebody says, well, there's a difference of opinion on that? Ibrahim, if you can start us off, go ahead.
Yeah, I think you can see the topic from different kind of views, but usually I would say if there are differences of opinions in Islam, you have different understandings of the text of the Quran, for example, or understandings of the hadith from the scholars.
Okay, that's very interesting. I look at it in a very similar way as well. I look at it as the extraction of the law itself. That's where the scholars differ. So the usul, where they extract and what tools they use to extract, I think the opinions differ at that level, thus trickling down to the Islamic law itself. Mamadou, if we can get your opinion on the same.
Yeah, carrying from what you just said, that can also be phrased in how do we derive rulings and law within Islamic Sharia.
Sure.
So deriving rulings, for example, most of the scholars, if not all, unanimously agree that we start with the Quran.
Yes.
And then maybe we go to the hadith, and then we disagree. Some may say we do the ijma of the companions. What did the companions agree upon? So the question is, how do we derive rulings and law? So that's what.
Yeah, I guess that also, and we're gonna get into a little bit of that, inshallah, later on in the show. Ilyas, if I can come to you and put the same question to you, why do you think that? What does that phrase mean to you, if I can put it this way?
For me, difference of opinion is when you have one topic and you have different viewpoints made by scholars. So, as Brother Muhammadu mentioned, how we derive rulings, and we're going to discuss maybe a bit later on the different madhahib, the different tools and different ways of breaking down a subject. And so a lot of it comes down to also new topics, things that weren't around in the time of the Sahaba. For example, a ruling on drugs.
Yeah.
So, when we look at these things and we have the topic, different scholars, they have different tools, different phrases, different ways of breaking things down, and then sometimes that does lead to differences. But then it's really upon the Muslim nation to really look at those differences for what they are and to follow what they believe is correct in these stances.
And that's a very important point that you brung in there, which is things that weren't around at the Prophet ﷺ's time. So the Quran or the Hadith directly didn't speak about these things. Now Islamic law has set different ways for us to extract rulings for these items or these new things that we come across. And I think that's where a lot of difference of opinion also we can see, especially during our times, that many new things or new inventions or new innovations that people differ upon. And I think that's one of the reasons there. Ali, if I can put the same question to you, I want to get your thoughts on it as well.
Yes, I think it's very important for us to make it clear that this difference of opinions between scholars is not due to a lack of or due to a deficiency in the Sharia itself. This is something perfectly normal. Allah made this Sharia, completed it and perfected it in the most proper way. The Prophet ﷺ conveyed it in the most amazing way, and the Sahaba did the same job. And this is basically not deficiency in the Sharia, but rather it's a rahmah, as scholars said. It's a rahmah. It makes it more convenient for people, and it's due to the you can look at it from the text point of view. The text of Arabic is very flexible, could be understood in many ways, and also the minds of people, the minds of scholars think in different ways, and that's why the differences come.
Yeah, and that's a very good point, because just this panel here, we can bring up a certain issue and not all of us will agree on it. Some of us will have a different viewpoint than others. And this is just a small panel here, so you can just imagine that different scholars throughout times, obviously different environments, different cultures, they had different outlooks on similar issues. So now basically what I want to do is, Ibrahim, if I can come back to you, I want to start off by asking you if you can give us some of the examples so our viewers can actually understand these differences once you speak about it.
Okay, we maybe have a very easy example for making wudu. For example, in making wudu, we have a lot of different opinions in how to make wudu, and or what part of the wudu is fard and what is sunnah. And for example, to wash your hairs, is Allah says wamsahu bi ru'usikum. So the ba before the ru'usikum, this is the point of different views. So some in the Shafi'iyya madhab, for example, we say you only have to wash 3 hairs of your head, and we have other scholars saying the quarter of your head. Some says the whole hairs. So this is where the differences come from. For example, this is a small example. It's just one letter.
It's the differences in what the ba actually means or what it stands for.
This is one.
And I like how you bring the usuli opinion there. You're a student of Sharia. Okay, Muhammad, if I can get you to give us some examples.
I mean, I wanted to talk about a famous example that I'm sure all the viewers are aware of, which is the story of, I believe Prophet ﷺ said, do not pray Salat al-Asr until you reach Banu Qurayza. And a group of the companions prayed beforehand, thinking it was a test, and a group of companions did not want to deviate from the Prophet's wording and waited till they got to there. But I find, so that's a different opinion right with the Sahaba. But what I find really quite amazing with that is what the Prophet ﷺ said himself afterwards. He did not condemn any of them. He said, those who made ijtihad and got it right get 2 reward, and those who made ijtihad and did not got 1 reward. But he didn't say which group was wrong or right. So I found that really quite amazing.
And another thing that we can extract from that story actually is the way they extracted that opinion of the Prophet ﷺ. So you have one group of companions of the Prophet ﷺ who said, well, the Prophet ﷺ didn't really want us to delay Asr. The reason behind it, so they searched for the illah here. They said the reason behind it was so that we hurry and get to the fort as soon as possible. Whereas the other group of companions of the Prophet ﷺ said, no, this is the exact words of the Prophet ﷺ and we're going to stick to it. So I mean, we see this difference of opinion also later on with the scholars and the different ai*imma in our religion, that some of them try to look for the reasonings behind the rulings, and others try to stick as close as possible to the text. Ilyas, if I can bring the same question to you here.
One of the things that come to my mind is definition. For example, some Hanafis at Hanaf make a difference between fard and wajib. Whereas when I studied some fiqh in London, they're essentially the same thing, or they're the same thing. So one of the things that come to my mind is the issue of Salatul Witr.
Yes.
You know, obviously some Hanafis, they make sure that they pray it. You know, when you go to a Hanafi mosque in London, they all pray it, and sometimes the Hanbalis are sitting down like, after they don't pray it. Chilling. Yeah. So that always sticks out in my mind because it's a difference that you see in front of you on a daily basis. You know, and it's just with regards to what Ibrahim said about the wudu as well. It's, you know, it always comes, and what Muhammad you mentioned also, it just shows you how vast and how great this deen is. You know, to the smallest of details, everything is, you know, laid out for you. If you don't believe this, then you have this opinion. Obviously, there are some opinions that are just, you know, nonsensical, and sometimes people just look to say, okay, this is difference of opinion because they want to practice something that they shouldn't.
Yeah.
So the term difference of opinion has been abused in our time today. I don't know if we can give some examples later on. So, but just going back to the salah, that's always stood out to me. Just the difference between like
the farad and
the wajib and the sunnah mu'akkada and these things.
And it's very interesting because a lot of these differences, when it comes to terminology, is just technical differences.
Yeah.
Basically, what proof was used to extract that ruling would determine which term you would use to describe that ruling.
Yeah.
So sometimes they're very technical issues, but you know, they create these differences of opinions.
Yeah.
Ali, if I can go to you and you can share with us some of the examples.
Okay, before I share the example, I wanted to mention that, you know, difference of opinions, you know, has two levels or two categories. Yeah, scholars say there is difference that is valid, that is strong, and there is difference and disagreement that is insignificant. Like, for example, in certain issues, for example, you know, having your throat below your ankle, for example, this is an issue that could cause problems between the people. You know, this is an issue of valid disagreement between the scholars. You should not be refuting those who have the throat below the ankle, and you should not call those who have the, you know, throats above their ankle extremist. This is a valid disagreement between scholars. Whereas some other issues, you know, people would consider, you know, issues of disagreement between scholars, whereas, you know, it's a very insignificant difference of opinions, meaning that would be 99% of scholars said something and only 1% you know, of them said something else, and they would follow that 1%. Now we have to make, you know, we have to make sure that if there is khilaf, you have to understand, is this, ask someone of knowledge, is this khilaf sa'iq, is it a significant khilaf or insignificant khilaf? Also, one of the issues that are even more serious than the issues that they mentioned is the issue of salah. Certain scholars considered those who don't pray at all are, you know, outside of the religion. Okay, and this is one opinion, a valid opinion. Other scholars, and this is the majority, I would assume, they consider if someone doesn't pray at all, he's very far from Allah, and he's, you know, fasiq, but he's not a kafir. So this is another issue, and a very serious issue. And even the Sahaba themselves, you know, differed on that. Like Umar ibn Khattab considered the one who doesn't pray at all kafir, outside of the religion. But I think scholars like Abdullah ibn Abbas and others considered him not to be kafir, because he believes that salah is wajib, but he's just too lazy to do it. So this is another example of khilaf.
Well, I think it also depends on, well, just for that certain issue, whether the person believes that salah itself is wajib or not. Whereas the case that he doesn't believe it's wajib, then he's not believing a...
there's no khilaf about that.
Then there's no khilaf. Just for that point, I just want to clarify something there. So basically, after establishing the fact that there are differences of opinions, and we gave some examples, I want to speak about something very interesting. Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not just send down a unified code or a unified law that would, you know, last us forever, and nobody would differ, and everybody would, you know, follow the same set of laws and rules? Why is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the way He sent down His law, the way He sent down the Sharia, He left it open so that people may differ and people may extract differences of opinions? Why is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala left it like that? Ibrahim, if you can start us off, inshallah.
Yeah, first we know the Sharia is valid until the Day of Judgment. So there will be different kind of cultures, different kind of people entering Islam. Other countries, maybe far away countries like China or something, will enter Islam, and they have different circumstances and different way of livings. And this different way of livings, they need the rules which is suitable for them. So I think this is one of the wisdoms behind it, that we have so many different opinions. It's not just to make it easy for everyone and finish, but it's just to fit every rule for the situation and for the people themselves, for the tribes, or for
different cultures,
different cultures, different countries. And we have a very nice example from Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, when there was someone giving him a book called Ikhtilaf of the Sahaba, and then he said, don't call it that way, don't call it Ikhtilaf of Sahaba, call it the book of wideness, Kitab al-Si'ah. And he said, call it the book of wideness. So even Abdullah ibn Abdul Aziz rahimahullah, when it's narrated that he said that he liked it when the Sahaba had different opinions, that he knows if he sees someone who is inside this circle of different opinions, he's safe. But if there's no different opinion and he sees something and he is doing something and against the view of the
opinions
of the opinion, so he knows that he's making a sin or something. So you can't have the mercy to the people. As a scholar, and the job of a scholar is to make it easy for people and to be merciful with the people and to see what fits for them. And I think this is one of the biggest wisdoms of Sharia.
I completely agree with you, and I really like the point that you made about where Imam Ahmad said, look at it as something, the book of wideness or openness. And it's all perspective, the way you look at it. So you can look at it as differences of opinions and the scholar differed on this and this, or you can look at it as mercy from God, that you have the choice, it's flexible. Mamadou, let me get some of your thoughts on this.
Just carry on, I think above all, difference of opinion is a mercy from Allah, and above all of that, Allah knows man more than we know ourselves. He knows the nature of man, and there can be no two same perspectives on the same issue, ever. And I recall during my studies on my comparative law essay, I was asked to write, does the Sharia need reform? Is the Sharia in need of reform? And it was from an angle where the Sharia is backwards, and and my conclusion, I looked at the critics, and my conclusion was that the Sharia is inherently capable of reform to any time and any place. So that was kind of my conclusion with that.
And that's very interesting, because that is the purpose of Islamic law. Whereas the previous laws that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down, whether it be to Moses or to Isa, was for a certain time and a certain people. And the Qur'an and the Sunnah and Sharia al-Islamiyya, like Islamic law, was not sent for a certain group of people, nor was it sent for a certain time. It was sent until the end of time, and it was sent for every single person and every single culture. So it's designed in a way that it can encompass every single culture, no matter how different they may be from each other. Ilyas, if I can come to you, I want to get your thoughts on it as well.
Yeah, it's a brilliant question, and I really like the answers that we've had so far. One of the wisdoms I would extract from it is it allows Islamic thought to flourish. If everything was just set down in one way, we would just follow and that would be it. No, there's no problem with that if Allah chose it. But then at the same time, the flexibility that we have, it allows us to think and develop and improve our situation. And what we find is that one of the greatest periods of Islam was when Islamic knowledge was actually flourishing, when there was a lot of room and a lot of discussions amongst different thoughts and different ways of thinking, and it promoted Islam at the end of the day, just Islam, Whereas nowadays, even in terms of the way we're taught in the Muslim world, a lot of it has gone away from actually thinking, and it's just down to memorization. You have to memorize X, Y, and Z. And we've actually taken away tools of being able to think openly and critique. So another reason why I believe that the Sharia being flexible in some issues, it allows other subjects to flourish also. So Brother Ibrahim mentioned, the ba. We're talking about wudu. That comes down to Arabic language. If we just had the Sharia just laid down for us, if you had Islamic law just laid down for us, we wouldn't have that approach to wudu in this way of thinking. So it allows Arabic language to flourish also. When we look at the different Islamic sciences, things like tafsir, fiqh, and language and the Sharia and all these things, all of some things are fixed. Arabic is fixed. It's got different opinions, etc., but essentially fixed. Whereas Islamic law is open and it allows the other sciences to contribute to it, and it allows the development of all sciences.
Something very interesting that you mentioned was that the way Islamic law was designed was to allow society to flourish.
Yeah.
And when we look at the decline of the Islamic empire, we see that there was a period where people weren't developing law.
Yeah.
And this period extended for hundreds of years, and when new issues and new problems arose, the scholars and the government was not able to tackle these issues or these problems Islamically, because they haven't developed, or they hadn't developed anything to counter these issues.
Yeah.
Whereas if they continue to develop and to extract and to differ on opinions and to have various ways to approach something, they would have been ready for these issues.
Yeah.
And you see it towards the end of, I would say, the 17th century and the early 18th century, where the Islamic empires were extracting laws from Europe, because European laws were able to counter problems that they were facing, or different issues that were facing the world during those times. Whereas Islamic law, because of not developing for so many hundreds of years, it didn't have what it takes to counter these issues.
Yeah.
Now, that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala left it open, so that we can constantly develop these laws, and constantly anything new that comes to us that we encounter, we can deal with them.
Yeah, so if I can just mention also, I mean, with regards to, we were touching this earlier on, new issues.
Yes.
A big one is cigarettes.
Yeah.
Obviously in Quran Hadith there's nothing about cigarettes. Whereas if the Sharia was fixed, we wouldn't be able to derive a ruling from it, and even though a lot of Muslims are smoking anyway, there'll be no regret or no bad feeling about it. And then on top of that, when cigarettes first was for example in UK, when cigarettes was first introduced, a lot of the scholars said it was halal.
Yeah.
It was fine, because they didn't understand the dangers behind it. But now after studies showed how dangerous cigarettes were, then they were able to turn and say, well, no, this is well, some said it was makruh, and some just said it was the Hanafi said it was makruh. Then the rest said it was
haram. We're looking for a fatwa here. Yeah, go on. Ali, if we can get your thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, just to make it clear for the viewers, of course, majority of the Sharia law, especially the main principles are agreed upon. There is no khilaf about them. Yeah. The khilaf comes, on minor issues. So the common ground is a lot bigger than the disputed issues. The second thing, in addition to what they said, khilaf being rahmah, and an opportunity for us to reflect and think and use our minds. I would say a very important wisdom of that is it's a test from Allah. Okay, if there is no khilaf, then we have one person to follow, one view or one opinion to follow. But the khilaf, Allah wanted us to test us and to see how we would react to that, to these differences of opinion. Would we tolerate one another, or would we just fight and be intolerant towards one another, and fights happen and we start criticizing and cussing other people from other madahib? So this is a test from Allah, and from what we see nowadays, many people have failed that test. They're just very intolerant when it comes to other opinions, valid opinions. So it's a test from Allah, and when we see how the Sahaba dealt with the difference of opinions between one another, and the Tabi'een and the big scholars, they were very tolerant. Unlike many of the people now, ignorant people, they would be very loud and very intolerant, harsh. Yes.
That's quite interesting, and I like how you compared it to being a test, or you likened it to being a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to see how we interact with each other. Now, obviously, this might be confusing for many of the viewers that, okay, there's so many differences of opinions. How do we know which one to follow? who are we supposed to follow? Which opinion should we follow? If there's more than one opinion on the subject, which one do we take? So, I mean, this is the next thing that we want to tackle, inshallah. If I can start with you again, Ibrahim.
This is one of the
toughest ones.
My personal thoughts on it is everyone needs to have a scholar or someone. And we're talking to the Amma, to the normal Muslims. So they are not Tulab al-Ilm, they are not students of knowledge, and they are not scholars. So it's very, very confusing for them. So they should have a scholar which they trust and they follow him. And this scholar, his job is to take or to know the different opinions and to get the opinion which fits this person, especially an individual. It's not like any, because we have the problem, for especially in the Western world, we have some people think that if we say al-ikhtilaf wa rahma, now it's a nice speech, but it's not a hadith. Some people think that it's a hadith. It's not a hadith, but on the other side we have a lot of ayat which in the Quran which says that we should not have differences and different opinions. We should be together. And so alhamdulillah, like Brother Ali said before, but the scholar, his job is to know all the differences and to see which opinion fits the individual who's asking him. And
so
for the
fatwa,
Amma,
sorry to disturb you, the fatwa that the scholar gives, basically after seeing the person's situation, after seeing the environment he lives in, then he's able to give
because different opinions is not just a permission for everyone to take which is most easy for him, or to take which is it's like we have some brothers and sisters, may Allah be pleased with them, they just say, okay, alhamdulillah, there's ikhtilaf, so I will just take this one.
take
I like
the
this
easiest
one. Now take the easiest one, and then you build your own religion. يوافق الهوى.
And that clearly contradicts the Quran ayah where it says وَلَا تَتَّبِعِ الْهَوَىٰ, don't follow your desires, because now you're picking and choosing. From the different opinions. Mamadou, I want to get your thoughts on this.
I mean, just to echo what Brother said over here, that it's practical advice. I would say find your local mosque, someone that you trust, but also we live in an age where everyone wants to be a scholar, or everyone believes they're a scholar, and someone with maybe 100,000 views on YouTube is not qualified to give fatwa. So you should find someone who is qualified and that you trust. And then more than that, I find that this deen is a legacy. It's been transmitted, preserved from generation to generation, and it's reached us in its pristine condition. So we to find someone who has a chain, or someone who knows connection to a chain, then at least you can trust that knowledge.
That's very interesting. Ilyas, I want to get your thoughts on this as well. But before I actually go to Ilyas, we're going to go for a short break, so stay tuned.
Perfect, my alliance, and I praise. Subhanallahi wa bihamdihi, Subhanallahi, how perfect you are, Allah, Subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Scale of justice will be brought before me.
Through the powerfully vivid, spiritually uplifting, heart-softening, life-changing, soul-transforming descriptions of life after death, we reminded ourselves about the barrier that is placed. So once you leave this world, a barrier is placed behind you, and you are prevented from coming back to this life. Those 2 rak'ahs that you used to pray, you used to take for granted. After you leave this world, there's a barrier. The journey of the soul through the stages of the day of resurrection, and the explicit descriptions of hellfire, as well as the beautiful and spiritually uplifting descriptions of paradise. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, we did not create the heavens and the earth without purpose, without aim, without a reason. This is the assumption of those who disbelieve, so beware and woe to those who disbelieve from the hellfire. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us immediately the example of the righteous people on the Day of Judgment. So he says, أَلَا إِنَّ أَوْلِيَاءَ اللَّهِ لَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, no doubt, verily, the awliya of Allah, the friends of Allah, those who are close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is no fear on them, nor shall they grieve.
Now you shall have to explain your whole lifespan.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم قالوا أجئتنا لتأفكنا عن آلهتنا فأتنا بما تعدنا إن كنت من الصادقين
له ملك السماوات والأرض وإلى الله ترجع الأمور
فلما رأوه عارضا مستقبل أوديتهم قالوا هذا عارض ممطرنا بل هو ما استعجلتم به.
أخا عاد إذ أنذر قومه بالأحقاف وقد خلت النذر من بين يديه ومن خلفه ألا تعبدوا إلا الله إني أخاف عليكم عذاب يوم عظيم.
فيهما عينان نضاختان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيهما فاكهة ونخل ورمان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان.
Sent from Allah to an angel then to a man. That man was Muhammad, the best of creation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Let's Talk. Now, before we went for that short break, we were discussing the issue of which opinion to follow when there are different opinions or various opinions on a single subject. So we were going to let Brother Ilyas speak. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair. First and foremost, one of the problems that we have, or many young people have, is, they, as you mentioned, they say, what opinion should I follow? There's a Hanbali opinion, a Shafi'i opinion, there's Maliki, etc. Whereas when we were taught, the whole point of having a madhab was that you don't have these problems. When you when you understand your own basics, then you can go on to other opinions. Whereas the problem that we have now is that someone will just look at something on Google and then expect to understand what how the differences arise, etc. So I would say, with regards to what opinion to follow, if you've grew up learning a particular madhab, etc., then just inshallah, you follow that to the best of your ability. And then when you actually learn some more, and you actually say, well, I don't actually think this is correct, I believe another opinion is correct, then in that case, you would follow that opinion. And another big issue that we have in London is abuse of following opinions. So
the exact opposite.
The exact opposite. So, for example, this happens a lot now. Brother and sister, they start talking online and decide that they want to get married, etc. And maybe the sister's family doesn't agree. Now, what they would do in this situation, the families aren't agreeing, shar'an, you can't get married without a wali, etc. So what they might do, they might run to a particular madhab that don't agree, or say they don't necessarily need to have a wali, and then they go and do it in that way. That's abuse.
That's the picking and choosing. That's when that comes in.
So we need to look at things. So when it comes to differing or choosing an opinion, first and foremost, we need to look at issues that affect us.
Yeah.
Because some of the problems, some of the differences that cause confusion are some things that are not even relevant in a person's life.
Yeah.
You know, so we need to look at issues that affect us personally in our day-to-day lives and not try to cause fitna and, you know, problems amongst Muslims, you know. For example, McDonald's is a big one. Like,
in the UK.
McDonald's in the UK, is it halal? Obviously there's a fatwa, you know, it's halal.
That laugh sounded like he...
So things like McDonald's, KFC. So some scholars, they mention it's halal, but they were talking about in their country.
Yeah.
You know, but in England it's different.
Exactly.
So,
just to, sorry, not to interrupt you, but that's similar to what Ibrahim was saying, whereas the scholar that you ask or that you take from has to understand your culture, your society, because sometimes when you, we can say, import a fatwa from a different country, that fatwa may not relate to you or relate to your society, so it's not going to be for you.
And this is one of the reasons why some people get confused, because they're not directly speaking to someone of knowledge, they're looking on a fatwa website.
Just to add to that, the thing about Sheikh Google is, for example, the example...
Alama Google.
Alama Google. The example of... what's it called? The example of...
Alama Google.
No, going on to Google, for example, a medical doctor. If you had to go back to take an operation and the doctor said to you, I've never studied in my life, but I read books on medical journal, you're not going to let him operate on you. So, for example, you want to go online and you understand all the different opinions, you're not capable of doing that. That's why go to someone who's capable and who has that knowledge, and then just take it from them, and then yes or no answer should suffice. And also as well, I think as well, there is, in the Western tradition, we have this kind of arrogance of accepting knowledge.
No.
What's your dalil? What's your evidence? But you're not even at that level to assess what is stronger dalil and what isn't. You're just, all you need now, is it halal or can I do it? Yes or no. That's all you need, and leave it.
That's quite interesting. Ilyas, if you want to continue your point, and then...
No, I had nothing else to do.
It's just the McDonald's and...
McDonald's.
Got me riled up.
Well, okay, I'll let Ali go first, and then I'll give some of my thoughts on this that I've been jotting down. Go ahead, Ali.
Yes, just to quickly overview what they said.
He's been summarizing everybody's...
I'm the last show, that's why I do. So, yes, if a Muslim has the enough amount of knowledge to do muqaran and to compare between, opinions, then we should go for it. But unfortunately, most of the ummah are not like that. Only few people are qualified to do that. So the awam, the public Muslims, they should be very selective and very careful when it comes to which scholar they take knowledge from. Unfortunately, some people are very easy with that. And as he said, are very careful and very selective when it comes to, for example, doctors. We want to choose the best doctor. But when it comes to Islamic, and the doctor of heart, the scholars say, like the Mufti is the doctor of heart, because he tells you what's the cure for your heart. We are very easy, and we take any fatwa. So take the fatwa from the people who know it. وَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. If there's no one available, then you can follow a madhab, and you have to understand the principles of that madhab. You have to understand what the scholars meant by this fatwa, because one fatwa could be understood
for a different time.
It could be understood differently. So that's pretty much it.
Well, my thoughts are very similar to everybody's, so a bit of mix and match, I would say. I would say many times throughout history, the scholars have spoken on this issue many times, and they've divided the different types of people. Now, not to get into the different types of people in detail, just to say, for example, we have the average Muslims, then we have the students of knowledge, then we have the scholars, and then we have different levels of scholarship actually. You have the mujtahids who are at the top, who can extract directly from the Quran and Sunnah. Now, you can't compare a mujtahid, someone who can extract from the Quran and Sunnah, who understands the usuli principles, who understands the language to a very good extent, to a person who's just an average Muslim.
Of course.
He's not able to extract the same way a student of knowledge is. So, he can't compare himself or think that he can do the same that a mujtahid can. So now this person, this average Muslim, what does he do? He looks he looks up to somebody who is in his local country or local city that can help him understand his religion. Now what that means is, maybe if he understands a little bit of difference of opinions, the person can tell him, well, this comes from this comes from this hadith, and explain a little more in detail. But if he's just a beginning, a new Muslim, and doesn't understand where this is coming from, what will suffice him is whatever the scholar tells him. So if it's a trustworthy scholar and he tells him, well, do wudu this way, that's it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to ask him, well, why did you wipe your head like this? He's not going to ask him that. He's just responsible to learn how to do wudu from somebody that is trustworthy. I mean, those are some points that I just wanted to add quickly. Yes?
I think an important point is, with regards to choosing opinions, we need to have ikhlas.
Yes, that's very
It is a very, very key point, because we're living in a time where everything is halal. You could find a fatwa for anything. So when we're looking at differences of opinion, we really need to make sure that we're choosing something that we honestly believe that Allah is pleased with and Allah is happy with.
Just to add to that as well, I remember being told by my teacher, everyone is faqih your nafs, you are the faqih of yourself. If you can convince yourself this opinion is legit, then alhamdulillah you can. But if you know in your heart that you can't, you know you just want to do it, but you can't convince yourself of it, then leave it.
And it's very true, because nobody else will know. You can tell all your friends, you can tell the whole world that I believe this is a stronger opinion, but deep down inside, you're the only one that knows, you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you don't believe that this is a stronger one. You're just taking it because it's easier. And also consistency is very important, that you don't choose and select the easiest ones you find, because there's no consistency there. All you're doing is, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَتَّبِعِ الْهَوَىٰ, you're doing the exact opposite. You're following your desires. You see, okay, well, Shaykh Ali said this, I'll take this from here. Shaykh Ilyas said this, I'll take this from here. Shaykh Muhammad said this, I'll take this from here. And you're mixing and matching without any sort of consistency, and that leads back to following your desires. So you select a shaykh that you know understands the Quran and Sunnah very well, or that has studied Islam from a certified institute, and is somebody that's trustworthy, and you take his opinions on the issue or on the matter. And like Ali, you said, if you can't find somebody in your local community, then obviously you can take on a madhab, because there's a lot of materials available for the different madhab. And follow the rules until you get to a level where you can then start seeing, well, okay, so the difference came from here, or the difference came from here. But it doesn't start from day one. It's not, day one you think that you're a mujtahid, okay, show me the different opinions, this one looks stronger, I'm taking this one. It doesn't work from day one. The next thing that we want to get into is actually the main focus of our conversation, which is, how can we deal with these differences of opinions, or choose an opinion without at the same time judging others or holding them accountable for the same opinion that you believe in? It's a very tough one, and this is, I believe, the main idea of our discussion, to how can we understand each other and not be intolerant towards another person's opinion. Ibrahim, if you can start us off.
This is very nice, subhanAllah, and I think it has a lot to do with the character of a Muslim, and with the way the Muslim is with Allah. So one thing which makes it a bit more easy is just look how did the one who said this opinion, for example Imam Ahmad, Imam Shafi'i, and the big A'imma, Imam Malik and Abu Hanifa, how did they deal with each other? How, when Imam Ahmad went to Imam Shafi'i, and Imam Ahmad says it's this bid'ah to make dua and qunut in the Fajr prayer, and when he was praying in the masjid of Imam Shafi'i, he was making the dua of qunut. So how did the scholars interact with each other, with the opinions of the other scholar? And I think if we just look at those scholars who are the owner of the opinion, and see how they was interacting with each other, then we should learn a lot how to deal with it in our community with the brothers and sisters.
And subhanAllah, the example you gave, if you actually look at the way the different scholars of the madhahib and the different mujtahideen treated each other when it came to their opinion, they were so tolerant, and they would discuss with each other. And nowadays these same differences divide us so much that you don't want to look at him, you don't want to give him your salam, you don't want to deal with him at all. Whereas if you look at the people who came up with these opinions, or extracted, I would say actually, extracted these opinions from the Quran and Sunnah, the way they dealt with each other, that's a very good point. I mean, that's something we can learn from. Mamatu?
I think as well, what I've always been taught is that the halal and the haram are clear. So those, and everything is in between that is ambiguous, wherever the scholars will place them. And I also realised lessons from the Salaf is that they would rarely say things are haram, not out of, even they didn't agree with it, but because they realised how harsh the word haram is. And I remember a student of Imam Malik once said, I learned so many of the akhwal of the ulama, so many sayings of the ulama, I no longer saw people doing much wrong anymore, because I could see this person following this opinion and this opinion, because he understood that. So it's about saying, I'm not down with that. I don't agree with that. But as long as you've got backing for it, then alhamdulillah, young brother in Islam, we've got bigger things to worry about. So.
And I think that's another very good way that these differences are generally or typically minor differences.
Yes.
And sometimes we get caught up arguing these differences so much so that you start hating your Muslim brothers and sisters for it. Whereas there are greater problems we need to deal with.
Yes,
and it's not going to make a difference if he's praying with his hand here, where he's putting his hands in salah. There's major differences that we need, there's major problems that we need to deal with as an ummah, as a united ummah, rather than fight over very minor differences. Now, this will only come after you are able to understand and accept each other, that no matter what, we will differ. But I accept you as you are, as the opinion that you follow. Ilyas, if I can get your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, one of the ways is, first and foremost, we need to, a student or anyone should have humility. Shouldn't try to obligate their opinion on anyone. SubhanAllah, one thing that really took me back was one of the, his name escapes me, one of the scholars, he said that there's 3 levels of knowledge of a student of knowledge. The first one, he starts learning, he thinks he knows everything. He thinks he knows everything. And the second stage, he realizes, well, I was a bit ignorant before. And the third stage, he realizes I know nothing. Because you realize that the ocean of knowledge is very vast. So once you, because I think we've all done it before, we believe of another madhab in a certain way. But once you learn about people of that madhab and great people of that madhab, you learn about, okay, why did they come to this conclusion? Then you're taken aback. Sometimes you even adopt that opinion yourself, and then you're amazed by it. Instead of creating hatred and animosity amongst Muslims, it actually breeds the opposite. So one of the best ways, again, is that we can, like Brother Ibrahim mentioned, like when you see people, when you see scholars actually, how they interact with each other. Another famous example, in London we had like a few years ago a big debate about where do you put your arms after the Quran. It seems silly, isn't it? Would you keep it? Would you put it down your side? Well, after the Quran. So, subhanAllah, many of the imams, they said, obviously Shaykh Al-Albani and Ibn Baz, rahimahumullah, they differed on it. But when Al-Albani was praying behind Bin Baz, he followed Bin Baz's opinion to show, look, there's no need for you to behave in this way. Whereas you find that a person that has ignorance, they're the ones who divide over it. So it's really about adopting humility, understanding differences, because the people that have humility are people that don't understand the difference in the first place. So it's really important that we understand that Islam allows flexibility, and we can't obligate our opinions on everyone. Now, Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah, Shaykh al-Islam, he said that if everyone wants to pray in the exact same way, that in itself is a bid'ah. Because the Sahaba, it wasn't like that. So it's important that we understand that.
And when you were speaking about the different levels of a student of knowledge, it reminded me of one of the sayings of Imam Shafi, if I'm not mistaken, something along the lines of
the poetry.
The more I learn, the more I realize how little I know.
How ignorant was before.
It's so interesting when you actually ponder upon this quote. Alif, we can go to you and you can give us your thoughts, or like you like to put it, the summary.
Yes, of course, the more knowledge you seek, the more knowledge you gain, the more you understand that you should have, you should justify for other Muslims, you should have husn al-dhan, assume good of people. Not just in matters of khilaf, even when you see someone who appears to be doing something haram, you should have husn al-dhan of him. Some of the scholars, from the Salaf, they used to say, if I saw someone with his beard, dripping wine and dripping alcohol, I would assume that maybe he's spilled it, like he wasn't drinking. I would assume good of it.
Someone put it on
him. Someone put it on him. So this is the akhlaq of Muslims. This is the akhlaq that we should we should develop. That we have good assumption of one another, and we understand that the biggest priority is to unify, to be one ummah, not to follow and to stick to one opinion. The priority, we should prioritize. And as he said, as Brother Ilyas said, sometimes you should compromise your opinion. Even if you're 100% convinced with your opinion, you should compromise your opinion to avoid fitna. Like, for example, if someone was Maliki, for example, some of them, they pray with the hands on the back, on the sides. if he goes to a masjid full of ignorant people who don't know this opinion, and if he does that, people like think bad of him and they start calling him names, and sometimes they kick him out of the masjid because they don't know. So especially around people who are
What is all about that?
Isn't that right, Muhammad?
So if you think that people around you might misunderstand your opinion, you can compromise it to avoid the fitna. It's because the priority is, to avoid fitna, the priority is to, to have one ummah. That's the priority.
That's some very good points that you mentioned there. And I think some of the reasons why people are intolerant, number one, obviously, is a lack of knowledge. They don't understand and they don't know that there are valid differences of opinions. And obviously some communities are secluded from other communities or from the rest of the world, whereas they'll be a lot more rigid when it comes to differences of opinions because they've never been exposed to it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go to a bigger city or like in the US, for example, because people from different parts of the Muslim world mix, and people seen other ways that which people can pray, and they've seen other opinions and they've seen other madhahib, then it's a lot less rigid, I would say, because they can at least understand that, okay, at least he's following a different opinion within Islamic law, and this person is taking this opinion within Islamic law. So I think the first and most important thing that leads to intolerance is not knowing, not knowing that there are valid opinions. And another common misconception which I want to comment on is sometimes people hear of one hadith and they will say, okay, this is the opinion. The Prophet ﷺ said, this is how we're going to do this. Now, what happens here is that they think this is the only hadith, or this is the only opinion. Whereas there can be so many other ahadith dealing with the same issue, but the Prophet ﷺ doing something else. Now, there's so many narrations of the way the Prophet ﷺ prayed his Salatul Witr. There's so many narrations of the way the Prophet ﷺ, where he kept his hands. Yes. And for example, Imam Ahmad's opinion on this is very beautiful. He says, whether you keep it here, wherever you keep it, the Prophet ﷺ, there's narrations of him keeping it here, there's narrations of him keeping it here, and there's narrations of him keeping it below the navel. So there's different opinions, or different ways that the Prophet ﷺ himself prayed. Yes. So, which leaves, the room for us to understand and to know that if you feel comfortable praying like this, or below your navel, and you're allowed to. With that being said, alhamdulillah, we had an amazing program here. I want to thank you guys for joining me. Thank you, Ibrahim, Mohamedou, Ilyas, Ali. It was a wonderful program, seriously. I hope the viewers benefited from tonight's program. Don't forget to check out our Facebook page, and until next time, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How perfect my Allah is, and I praise Him. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, Subhanallah. How perfect you are, Allah. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, Subhanallah. How perfect you are, Allah. Your mercy is great.